Cornwall is a moot point because we're not. It is no cost to the city. Another issue I had, why I wanted, the economic development impact part of the report. We had South Glengarry saying one thing, we had the city saying something else. I don't understand why both parties could not get together and come up with one set of numbers instead of them saying something and us saying something else. That was absolutely confusing. As far as competition is concerned, there's someone with apparently deep pockets who's going to build their own water and sewer system anyway. So they're going to compete with us no matter what. So what is it that's holding us back? We're going to have the competition. I hope that God, no Tim Hortons ever opens up again in Cornwall. We might shut them down. It might create competition with another Tim Hortons. I'm sorry, I brought this forward. I guess it's a lost cause. But at the end of the day, some of the arguments are pretty bloody weak.
Any further debate? Councillor Sampson has spoken. Councillor Rivette has spoken. Councillor Plymouth, please. Councillor Plymouth, before you start, if I might, because some of you are trying to get my attention. If you've already spoken, please don't put your hands up. It's a moot point. Councillor Plymouth, please.
A couple of questions before I make some comments. When we were setting up the new wastewater treatment plant, was it contemplated that we would provide water in any way to South Glengarry or anywhere else? Is that contemplated within the...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the wastewater treatment plant is not a potable water issue, so it, so the water issue was never really talked about. Okay. The potable water, the wastewater, yes, it was certainly a matter of discussion. And during the environmental assessment, there was opportunity for the public to comment and certainly other municipalities, our neighbors, and they did. South Glengarry did provide a comment that they would be interested, and so that was documented and has become part of the public record and is part of the process. The capacity increase at the wastewater treatment plant is in the order of about 20% from what the existing was. So there's a 20% increase. And the environmental assessment speaks to 3 areas that it possibly could be used. That additional capacity could be used for additional development or additional flow of the within the city of Cornwall. Development within the city of Cornwall could be used for combined sewer overflow treatment. So we do have a combined sewer overflow situation where some of the water goes to the river without being treated. What we would potentially do with this excess capacity is to treat it before it overflows, so not let it overflow, in other words. And the third option is, in fact, to provide it to our neighbors, whether it be South Stormont or South Glengarry. So that was an option, but not a requirement.
So what happens when we say no, and they want to compete against us by developing their own business park right next door? What do? Would they have to build all of the same infrastructure that we've just built?
I know that the township has undertaken an environmental assessment recently, and recently I say within the last likely 5 years or so, that looks at all options, including connecting to the city of Cornwall in certain areas, and in other areas looking at expanding their facilities. They have a water treatment facility and a wastewater treatment facility at Glen Walter. Mm-hmm. So those are options that they have available. I could tell you though that that particular environmental assessment, my recollection of it is that the area that's in question here, the boundary of the city, or close to the city of Cornwall, was hopefully to connect to city facilities. That is their plan. As far as if the connection is not possible, then obviously they're going to have to go back and look at their other options, which could be to provide more capacity at their plants and more distribution and collection infrastructure.
So here's my struggle, but I made a decision. But the struggle I had was from a building infrastructure construction efficiency process. If we have all the infrastructure, or most of it, and pretty good stuff, all done, and we have the capacity to serve a region, then it makes sense to serve the region because we have that capacity, rather than have all these people running around building new infrastructure. So I get that. That makes sense from a sustainability, just wastefulness, right? But the problem I have is that right next door, you charge less taxes. So the only way that I could see, as a city councillor for Cornwall, the only way that I could see us doing this is if somehow we not only had an agreement around costs, but that we also somehow figured out a way to share the additional assessment that you might get in your business park, so that it really is a region benefiting together. But I'm told that that would be tricky, that it's difficult to get municipalities to share assessment. But that's the true impact here, is if we provide the infrastructure and the water, and then you compete against us, and compete well because you're charging less taxes. I heard the expression today, charging rural taxes but getting urban services, then we're at an unfair advantage there, unless somehow we can also share in your increased assessment. So the only way that I could contemplate supporting this is if there was some formula around that. I don't know if anybody with administration could speak to that, but I haven't heard anybody tell us that somehow we could all grow together from that point of view. In other words, sharing the increased assessment that South Glengarry would get through this process.
Well, let me try if I can, Councillor.
Sure.
In the Watson report, the formula that is suggested with the fee structure and so on, and that doesn't just say that council would not want to make some modifications to that report for its own benefit, in a potentially a negotiation with the neighboring community of South Glengarry. And at that time, I think with the Watson report, we find, at least I've found, that discrepancy has been largely eliminated. That now it's not a completely level playing field, but it's come a long ways. And the gap is, I would, by my own definition, I would say marginal. But, you know, a difference is a difference, I understand. But the Watson suggestion as a foundation for negotiation for the city and its approach, if it chose to, if it reached that point with South Glengarry, I think you would find that, and I'll let either someone, well, Mr. Levac, Ms. Adams, Mr. Bullock have looked at that report to speak to that issue if they wish to.
Go ahead, Sir. Perhaps I'll let Ms. Adams speak to the issue of shared assessment and whether or not we can actually collect taxes, if you will, or assessment from an outlying municipality. Do you have a...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not prepared tonight to speak to that matter. I'm not familiar with other municipalities with sharing of assessment and what has occurred, if it's allowed. But specifically kind of going back to water and wastewater services, we are somewhat restricted in only being able to use costs that are required to maintain those services like a utility. So we're not able to profit from them, or we're not able to differentiate in the flow rates. So that's why we've come up with a proposal this evening that looks at connection charge to get connected to our infrastructure, as well as a capital charge, which would be charged every year to help maintain that infrastructure for that specific region in the future. And then the idea would be to revisit that fee structure every so many years to make sure that it's working the way, you know, we intended for it to work. And so every probably 3 to 5 years we'll have to review it, make sure that our estimates are accurate.
So the sense thank you for your answer. The sense I'm getting though is that we break even. It's not going to cost us anything to do this, but if their business park develops and competes against ours, that's when we lose. And we can't figure out a formula to share in that increased assessment. Because I mean, economic development needs to take place for all parties, all neighbors. if it's to be valuable, and if parties are to be satisfied with that. So until I see some kind of way or a creative approach or some kind of solution to have us share an increased assessment or to have a level playing field in terms of the taxes charged, then it would be hard for me to support this. I just want to make a little comment. You know, when you buy a car and you make the car payments and you give Buddy a lift and you charge him for the gas, that's good. But if you're going to do that on a regular basis, the person making the car payments is the one investing. And so the residents of Cornwall have been paying. We've been saving and paying taxes and putting money aside to build some of the best infrastructure that we can build. And so just dealing with costs doesn't cut it. It doesn't reflect all of those past savings and activities and investments made by the people of Cornwall. So unless we can come up with a different solution or a different proposal to share an increased assessment, I don't see how this could, how I could vote for this. Just one last comment. You know, we've made passing references to regionalization, and I think, you know, the time is coming when, you know, we might have to have some more serious discussions around some of those services. And I don't mean technical regionalization, but some form of regionalization so that we all benefit, the region benefits in an equal way. Thank you.
And upon reflection during our colleagues' intervention, I noticed some of you were seeking. Now, I'm prepared to, if there's a point of clarification, okay, but that means a question, no preamble. It'll cut you off. If you have a question to anyone on administration about this report, because this is an important matter for us and for South Glengarry, so I don't want to cut the debate short. But I'm not going to go a second round here.
Just ask the reporter what was there.
Oh, that's fine, we'll get to that certainly. So, it's a clarification? You have a question, so put the question directly and immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What percentage of residents don't have water that are demanding it?
Very few.
And when are they gonna get it?
Let them know.
Very few. The city of Cornwall is, I'd say, I'm looking for help here, but I'm going to say 95% service. Very few.
Boundary? I mean,
There's a,
South Bride,
What's the question? This is being answered.
there are a
one-third.
There are a few areas, but very, very few. There are very few private systems in the city of Cornwall. I'm going to throw out a number that we are in the 90s serviced, 90% and more.
Any other questions, Councilor Sampson?
Yes, one more. The city of Toronto has many islands. How come we can charge municipalities for water to different other areas, but we can't? We learned that at OMA. Why is there a perception that we can't charge more? And if it's going to cost them 28 million, why can't we make the big deal? Come up with 14 million and we'll give it to you.
I'll try to answer the question. We're not talking that kind of money here. We're in the order of 4 million or thereabouts. As far as what the city of Toronto does, I really can't speak to exactly what they have, but I know that the legislation that we've recently looked at and our solicitors and our consultants have looked at is that we can't profit from these services. We can charge, however, what our costs are. And our costs of not only today in the capital forecast of them, but in the life cycle costing of that infrastructure. So not only today's construction, but 50 years down the road, 75 years down the road, we can charge to have enough money to be able to replace that infrastructure. And that's what we're doing. That's what we've done in this example.
Murphy, Councilor Murphy?
Thank you, Your Worship. To our CAO, Mr. Levac, was annexation ever discussed? Because we've done it before with other neighboring municipalities. Was that ever part of the conversation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in this particular, I think it's been mentioned, there's been some discussion about it, but certainly nothing serious. I think that's a huge undertaking. It's been done before, but not for 50 years. So I think it's really not something that was truly on the table at this time.
Anyone else on this? Well, let me weigh in. I'm gonna swim up current. Because I think I owe it to you, and I owe it to the residents of Cornwall to state my view. I've always believed that what's good for our neighbor is good for us. That announcement South Stormont last week with UAP, distribution center, great news for South Stormont, good news for Cornwall. And I firmly believe that. In my heart of hearts, I believe that. And I guess I'm still just so filled with optimism and confidence for our city and for this region, based on what I have seen happen in the last 7 years now, while I've enjoyed the honor and privilege of serving this community from this chair, that I don't, for the love of me, see it stopping. And we're not going to stop it. We turn this down and listen, I understand and I respect how each of you have looked at this issue with the seriousness it deserves. I'm not here to second guess anyone. I just want to state my views and what I see as the future of Cornwall and the future of Eastern Ontario. I don't see our competition in South Glengarry. And I say that respectfully to the mayor and the community of South Glengarry. I may see Coteau a little bit. As I get into the Quebec border, I may see some competition there. I might see some competition in Mississauga and in other communities. But for this, in terms on the basis of the amount of land that we are being asked to consider to service, my confidence is such that I see an opportunity more than anything else. It won't be easy. There'll be some growing pains, sure. Yeah, there'll be some hurt somewhere along the way. Somebody might get hurt a little bit. But in the long run, listen, we are the commercial center of Eastern Ontario. Where do the people of South Glengarry or South Stormont? Okay, some of us go, a little further away maybe. But where do they buy their products? Where do they buy?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Grant?
To get in the debate, I think you have to leave the chair.
Okay, fine.
Fine.
Sure. No, be glad to.
Yeah.
No, that's not what I'm gonna do. I have no problem.
Exactly how I feel.
Just for the record, I don't need them.
And what particularly changed or firmed up my view on this subject matter to a great extent was the content of the report that we were